Hello, everyone, and welcome back to This Day in History, our nightly look back at a specific day in history, where we take a look back at the events of a day, the historic context in which they took place, and the historic ramifications of those events. As always, if you have not yet, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, the bell notification icon to be alerted anytime I post new content, and tell a friend. And without any further ado, This Day in History, the 4th of July. And on this day, in 1776, the Second Continental Congress formally approved the vote they had taken 2 days earlier to sever themselves from Great Britain, and explained in detail why they considered them independent states and sovereign from the Great Britain. The document, written by Thomas Jefferson and the Committee of Five, is one of the most important documents in the English history of the English language and human history. At the time, it seemed like a foregone conclusion that these men would end up in the gallows as treasonous traitors. But their actions would help spur on the revolution and light an age of revolution around the world. On this day in 1826, 50 years to the day after the adoption of the Declaration of Independence, two of the members of the Committee of Five and two of the signers and two of America's most prominent founding fathers would pass away. Thomas Jefferson, the primary author of the document, would die at 83 in Virginia. Jefferson, President of the United States from 1801 to 1809, America's third president, would die at the age of 83. And John Adams would die at the age of 90 in Massachusetts. Adams, President of the United States from 1797 until 1801, was the second president and the first vice president. Jefferson was the second vice president. Both men developed a fondness for each other in their later years and were close friends. Upon his death, it is reported that Adams' last words were, "And Jefferson lives." Unbeknownst to Adams, Jefferson had died hours earlier. There was a messenger on the way to him to pronounce to him that the death had occurred of his successor, Mr. Jefferson. At the time of his death, John Adams had lived to see not only the victory of America in the war, but his own son elected president of the United States. 1831. At the age of 73, James Monroe, the fifth president of the United States, died in New York. Monroe, who presided over the era of good feelings and had two very easy roads to election and re-election, died at the age of 73 on the 55th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Monroe, the last of the founding fathers that would serve as president, is one of the more obscure figures from the Revolution, but his gallantry and bravery should not be underestimated. Monroe is depicted in the famous portrait of Washington crossing the Delaware. 1872. On this day in 1872, America's 30th President, Calvin Coolidge, was born. Coolidge, the only president born on the 4th of July, is a very interesting figure. Coolidge presided over America from 1923 until 1929. Coolidge left office shortly before the crash of Wall Street in 1929. and presided over America during the decade of the 1920s, when America experienced rapid economic and social change. We have discussed Coolidge's death on this channel before. Coolidge would die at the age of 60 in 1931. I'm sorry, in 1932, shortly before, in January of that year. Coolidge is just a very, 1933, I'm losing my mind. 1933 at the age of 61. 60. He was 60. He was 60. He died in 1933. Coolidge is an interesting figure, mainly because of when he left office. He left office right before Wall Street crashed, and that terrible economic downturn is largely blamed on his predecessor, Herbert Hoover, although Coolidge would have taken many of the same actions that Hoover took in response to the crisis. Coolidge may have not signed some of the more devastating economic consequences that Hoover did, but he certainly would have not responded with the forceful hand of the federal government that was required to meet the crisis head on. He very much would have continued in the legacy of Hoover. And on this day, in 1997, Pathfinder landed on Mars. After a 7-month, 120-mile journey, Pathfinder landed on Mars. The next day, the probe's rover, Sojourner, began motoring across the planet's landscape, sending back data and photos of climate and ecology. And over the coming years, many more probes would go to Mars. The most successful of these would be the Spirit and Opportunity rovers that landed on the Martian surface in the decade to come. And that is all for this day in history, July 4th. Hope y'all come back. I'll see you tomorrow.